The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their empire stretched across 2,000 star systems. They had conquered more than 2,000 species. Some of those species still existed as servants. Others had been erased from history. They did not care which fate befell a species. They only cared about one thing: expansion. War was not a tragedy to them. It was a tool. They used it the way a farmer uses a plow. They would attack a species, break its defenses, and then offer terms. The conquered species would pay tribute. They would give resources, technology, and labor. In return, they would let them live. It was a simple system. It had worked for 10,000 years. Ambassador stood on the bridge of his diplomatic vessel and studied the blue planet on the. His scales were dark purple, a sign of his noble blood. His eyes were gold, sharp and intelligent. He had delivered the Dominion's ultimatum to 47 species. 45 had surrendered immediately. 2 had fought. Both were now dust. This new species called themselves humans. They had only recently left their home planet. Their technology was primitive. Their military was weak, or expected this meeting to last less than an hour. "Open a channel," he ordered. The communication officer obeyed. A moment later, a room full of humans appeared on the screen. They sat around a curved table. Their faces showed many colors and shapes, or found them ugly. They had no scales, no proper claws, no tails. They were soft creatures covered in thin skin and strange hair. A woman sat at the center of the table. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age. A small sign in front of her read, "Director, United Terran Council." "I am Ambassador of the Dominion," he announced. "I bring word from the High Council. Your species has been discovered. You have 2 choices. Submit to the Dominion and live as tribute species, or resist and be destroyed. You have 1 standard cycle to decide." He expected fear. He expected panic. He expected desperate pleas for mercy. Director simply looked at him. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black. They reminded of deep space, empty and cold. "Thank you for the introduction, Ambassador," she said. Her voice was calm. "Before we give our answer, we have some questions. May we ask them?" Or was surprised. No species had ever asked questions. They either fought or surrendered, but he was curious about these strange creatures. "You may ask," he said. "If we submit," Director said, "what happens to our people?" "You will pay tribute," or explained. 20% of your resources, 10% of your population for labor. Your military will be dissolved. You will serve the Dominion. "And if we fight and lose?" "The same, perhaps with harsher terms depending on how much you damage our forces." Director nodded slowly. She looked at the other humans around the table. They whispered among themselves, or waited. This was always the moment when species realized the truth. Fighting was pointless. Submission was the only logical choice. "One more question," Director said. "If we fight and lose, what happens to our children?" Or paused. This was an unusual question. "They will be raised as servants of the Dominion. They will work in our factories, our mines, our farms. They will serve." "For how long?" "Forever. Your species will serve until the Dominion no longer needs you, or until you are replaced by a more useful species." Director closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had changed, or could not identify what it was. But for the first time in his long career, he felt a small chill run down his spine. "We declined," she said. Or waited for more words. Threats, perhaps. Desperate bargaining. But Director simply sat in silence, watching him with those cold, dark eyes. "You understand what this means?" he asked. "Yes." "You will be destroyed." "Perhaps," she paused. "Or perhaps not, but we will not submit. We will not let our children grow up as slaves. We will not let our forget that they were once free. You may destroy us, Ambassador, but we will not submit." Or ended the communication. He was annoyed. He had expected this to be simple. Now he would have to make an example of these creatures. He contacted the High Council and requested permission to demonstrate the Dominion's power. Permission was granted within the hour. The human colony on Europa was a small moon orbiting a gas giant. 200,000 humans lived there. They worked in ice mines and research stations. They had families, dreams, and hopes for the future. The fleet arrived without warning. They did not demand surrender. They did not offer terms. They simply opened fire. The bombardment lasted 1 hour. When it was finished, Europa was a burning ruin. The ice had melted and then frozen again, trapping the remains of the colony in a tomb of red-stained crystal. 200,000 humans died. Men, women, and children. Scientists, miners, and teachers. All of them gone in 60 minutes. Or sent a message to Earth. This is what happens to those who resist. You have one more cycle to reconsider. Submit, or you will share Europa's fate. He expected surrender. He expected desperate pleas for mercy. He expected the humans to finally understand their place in the universe. Instead, he received silence. 1 day passed, then 2, then a week. The humans said nothing. They sent no messages, no diplomats, no threats. Their ships did not move. Their weapons did not fire. They simply existed in silence like a wounded animal waiting to die. Or reported to the High Council that the humans were broken. Their spirit had been crushed by the destruction of Europa. They were preparing to surrender. It was only a matter of time. The High Council was pleased. Another species would soon join the Dominion. Another world would pay tribute. The system worked as it always had. But Or was wrong. On Earth, the destruction of Europa had not broken humanity. It had transformed them. Director stood before the United Terran Council 3 days after the attack. The room was silent. Many of the representatives were crying. Others sat in shock, unable to speak. 200,000 of their people were dead, murdered, erased from existence as a demonstration of power. "We have a choice," Director said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "We can surrender. We can accept the Dominion's terms. We can let our children become slaves. We can let our forget that we were ever free." She paused. "Or we can fight." "Fight," a representative from the Asian Union said. "They destroyed Europa in an hour. 1 hour, we cannot fight them. Our technology is too primitive. Our fleet is too small. Fighting would be suicide." "Perhaps," Director said, "but I would rather die free than live as a slave. And I would rather give my a chance at freedom than guarantee them a life of servitude." She looked around the room. "But I will not make this choice for you. Each of you must decide for yourselves, for your nations, for your people." The debate lasted 3 days. Representatives argued, shouted, cried, and pleaded. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight to the last breath. Some wanted to flee, to find a new home far from the Dominion's reach. In the end, humanity chose to fight. But they did not fight the way they expected. The first thing the United Terran Council did was dissolve itself. Every nation on Earth gave up its military. Every fleet, every soldier, every weapon was transferred to a new organization, the Terran Defense Command. General Stone was placed in charge. He was an old man with gray hair and a face. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth. He had seen the worst of humanity and the best of it. He understood something that they did not. War was not a game. War was not a tool. War was a horror that destroyed everything it touched. And the only way to end that horror was to make sure it could never happen again. "We are not going to fight to win," General Stone told his commanders. "We are going to fight to end this war, forever. They have been waging war for 10,000 years. They expect us to fight the way their other enemies fought. They expect us to defend our territory, protect our resources, and eventually surrender when the cost becomes too high." He paused. "We are not going to do any of those things." "What are we going to do?" a young commander asked. "We are going to break them," Stone said. "Not their fleet, not their army, their ability to wage war. We are going to take away every tool, every resource, every system that allows them to threaten us. And when we are finished, they will never threaten anyone again." The commanders looked at each other. This was not how war was supposed to work. War had rules. You fought, you won or lost, and then you negotiated. You took territory, demanded tribute, and then you waited for the next war. But Stone did not care about rules. He cared about his. He cared about the children who had died on Europa. He cared about making sure that no child would ever die that way again. "The sea war is a cycle," Stone explained. "They fight, they conquer, they extract tribute, and then they wait until they are strong enough to fight again. They have done this for 10,000 years. They expect us to become part of that cycle, another species to harvest, another source of tribute." He stood up and walked to a large display screen. It showed a map of space. Thousands of star systems connected by trade routes and supply lines. Shipyards, factories, agricultural worlds, and military bases. "We are not going to become part of their cycle," Stone said. "We are going to break it. We are going to destroy their ability to wage war. Not their ships, not their soldiers, their ability." He pointed to the map. "Shipyards, fuel refineries, communication networks, training academies, supply depots. These are the things that allow the Dominion to exist. These are the things we are going to destroy." "That will take years," a commander said. "Maybe decades." "Yes," Stone agreed. "But when we are finished, our will be free. They will never have to fight this war again. They will never have to watch their colonies burn. They will never have to choose between slavery and death." He looked at each of his commanders. "That is what we are fighting for. Not victory, not territory, not tribute. Freedom, forever." While the military prepared for war, something else was happening on Earth. Teams of historians, psychologists, and cultural experts began studying the. They did not study their weapons or their tactics. They studied their culture, their history, their beliefs. They discovered something important. They did not understand total war. They had never fought to the death. They had never destroyed an enemy completely. For 10,000 years they had played a game. Attack, conquer, extract tribute, repeat. It was efficient, it was profitable, and it had never failed. Because no species had ever refused to play the game. Every species that had encountered understood the rules. Fight until the cost is too high, then surrender, pay tribute, wait for the next opportunity. It was the way of the galaxy. It was the natural order of things. Humanity was about to break that order. Director stood in her office, looking out at the night sky. The stars seemed cold and distant. Somewhere out there, they were waiting. They expected humanity to surrender. They expected humanity to join the cycle of conquest and tribute. A knock came at her door. She turned to find General Stone standing in the doorway. "The fleet is ready," he said. "We can begin operations in 3 weeks." Nodded slowly. "How many will die?" Stone was silent for a long moment. "Many, millions perhaps, maybe more," he paused. "But if we don't fight, billions will live as slaves, our children, every generation that comes after us." "I know," turned back to the window. "I keep thinking about Europa, 200,000 people, gone in an hour, families, children, all of them dead because we refused to submit." A tear ran down her cheek. "Was I wrong? Should I have surrendered? Should I have saved those lives?" Stone walked to her side. "Those people died because the murdered them, not because of you, not because of your choice." He put a hand on her shoulder. "And if we surrender now, their deaths will mean nothing. They will have died for nothing. But if we fight, if we win, if we break this cycle forever, then maybe their deaths will have meant something. Maybe they will have died for the freedom of every generation that comes after." Was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "There's something I've been thinking about, something that bothers me." "What?" "They asked us to choose between submission and death. They thought those were the only options." She turned to face Stone. "But there's a third option, one they never considered." "What option?" His eyes were hard and cold. "We can win. We can break them so completely that they can never threaten us again, and then we can show them mercy. We can rebuild what we destroyed. We can help them become something better." She paused. "The sea war as a harvest, a cycle of destruction and extraction, but we don't have to be like them. We can fight to end the cycle. We can fight so that no one ever has to fight again." Stone studied her face. "That's a beautiful dream, but war is ugly. When the killing starts, mercy is hard to find." "I know," said. "That's why we have to remember what we're fighting for. Not revenge, not conquest, not power." She looked back at the stars. We're fighting for we're fighting so that someday a human child can look up at those stars and not feel fear." 3 weeks later, the Terran Defense Command launched its first attack. But it was not the attack they expected. They had prepared for an assault on their fleet. They had prepared for desperate humans throwing themselves against superior firepower in a futile attempt at defense. Instead, the humans did something that they had never seen before. They ran. The human fleet scattered in 100 different directions. They slipped past the armada. They disappeared into the darkness between stars. And then they began to hunt. Not warships, not soldiers, not military targets. They hunted farms, factories, fuel depots, communication relays. They hunted everything that allowed the Dominion to exist. Ambassador or received the first report in his quarters. A human attack force had appeared in the agricultural sector, 40 ships. They had bypassed every military installation, every defensive station, every patrol fleet. They had surrounded the farming worlds. And they had demanded surrender. Or laughed when he read the report. This was the humans' great strategy, to attack farms. It was absurd. It was foolish. It was. He stopped laughing. It was working. The agricultural sector had no defenses. It had never needed defenses. Who attacked farms? What kind of species wasted military resources on food production facilities? Humans, apparently. Or realized for the first time that he might have made a terrible mistake. He had destroyed Europa to teach the humans fear. Instead, he had taught them something else. He had taught them that they showed no mercy. And now the humans were returning the lesson. Director's words echoed in his mind. "We will not submit. We will not let our children grow up as slaves." He had dismissed those words as empty defiance, the desperate bravado of a doomed species. Now he was beginning to understand their true meaning. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to end the war. Forever, the High Council gathered in the Chamber of Eternal Victory. The room was ancient, built 10,000 years ago when the Dominion was young. The walls were carved with the names of every species they had conquered. There were thousands of names. Some were still spoken by living slaves. Others had been forgotten by everyone except the stone itself. High Counselor sat at the head of the great table. His scales were pure white, a sign of his extreme age and wisdom. He had ruled the Dominion for 300 years. He had overseen the conquest of 200 species. He had never known defeat. "Explain this to me," he said, his voice cold as winter. "How did 40 human ships bypass our entire defensive network?" Admiral stood before the council, her head bowed in shame. She was the commander of the Third Fleet, the most powerful military force in the Dominion. She had won 100 battles. She had never lost a single engagement. Until now. "They did not bypass our defenses, High Counselor," she said. "They avoided them entirely. They did not attack our military installations. They did not engage our patrol fleets. They simply slipped between them." Slipped between them, leaned forward, his golden eyes blazing. "Our defensive network covers every major route in the sector. Every jump point is monitored. Every patrol lane is secured. How does one slip between such a network?" Admiral took a deep breath. The humans did not use the major routes. They did not use the jump points. They traveled through dead space, High Counselor, through the empty regions between stars, regions we do not monitor because there is nothing there. The council chamber fell silent. This was unprecedented. Every species in the galaxy used the established routes. The jump points were the only practical way to travel between stars. No one wandered through dead space. It was inefficient. It was dangerous. It was pointless. Except when your enemy expected you to follow the rules. How long did this journey take them? Asked. Our analysts estimate 3 months, High Counselor. 3 months of travel through empty space. 3 months with no resupply, no communication, no support. Is paused. They planned this from the beginning. From the moment we destroyed their colony on Europa, they were not paralyzed by grief. They were preparing. Counselor or spoke up. He was the ambassador who had delivered the ultimatum to the humans. He felt responsible for this disaster. What is the situation in the agricultural sector now? The humans have blockaded 12 farming worlds, is reported. They have not fired a single shot. They are simply waiting. They have broadcast a demand for unconditional surrender. Surrender, laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. They have 40 ships, we have thousands. Why would we surrender? They are threatening to destroy the food production facilities. High Counselor. If they do, the Dominion will face famine within 2 years. The chamber fell silent again. They were not farmers. They had never been farmers. They conquered species who knew how to grow food, and then they extracted that food as tribute. The agricultural sector produced 80% of the Dominion's food supply. Without it, billions would starve. Then destroy them, ordered. Send the Grand Armada, crush these insects and reclaim our worlds. I have already given those orders, High Counselor, is said. The Grand Armada will arrive in the agricultural sector within 2 weeks. She hesitated. But there is something else you should know. What? The humans have made their intentions clear. They are not trying to capture our farming worlds. They are not trying to extract tribute or negotiate terms. They say they are fighting to. She paused, as if the words themselves confused her. They say they are fighting to end the war. Forever. Stared at her. What does that mean? I do not know, High Counselor, but I believe we should take it seriously. These humans have already done things no species has ever done before. They traveled through dead space. They bypassed our entire defensive network. They targeted our food supply instead of our military. She took a deep breath. I believe they have a plan, and I believe we do not understand it. Ambassador or spoke again. I spoke with their leader, director. She asked me what would happen to their children if they fought and lost. At the time, I thought it was a strange question. Now I understand. He looked around the chamber. The humans are not fighting for territory. They are not fighting for resources. They are fighting for their descendants. They are fighting to give their children a future free from the Dominion. Impossible, said. No species can defeat the Dominion. We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. We will rule it for 10,000 more. With respect, High Counselor, or said, the humans do not seem to care about what is possible or impossible. They only care about their children. 2 weeks later, the Grand Armada arrived in the agricultural sector. Admiral is stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Dominion. It was the largest warship ever built, a mountain of metal and weapons that could destroy planets. Behind her stretched the greatest fleet in galactic history, 10,000 warships, 1,000,000 soldiers, enough firepower to burn 100 worlds. Against them stood 40 human ships. The humans had positioned themselves between the Armada and the farming worlds. Their ships were small and primitive. Their weapons were weak. Their shields were thin. By every measure, they should have been destroyed in seconds. But they did not run. They did not surrender. They simply waited. Is opened a communication channel. Human vessels. This is Admiral is of the Grand Armada. You are outnumbered and surrender now and we will spare your lives. Resist and you will be destroyed. A human face appeared on the It was an old man with gray hair and scars on his face. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations. His eyes were calm and steady. "Admiral," he said, "I am General Stone of the Terran Defense Command. Thank you for coming. We have been waiting for you." "Waiting for us?" Is was confused. "You are about to die. Why would you wait for that?" "Because you brought your entire Grand Armada here," Stone said. "All 10,000 ships, all 1 million soldiers, the greatest military force in your dominion." He smiled slightly. "Which means they are not somewhere else." Is felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "Your armada is here, but we are not." Stone gestured to the ships around him. "These 40 ships, they are a distraction, Admiral, a decoy. We never intended to fight you here. We only needed to keep your attention while our real forces did their work." "What work? What are you talking about?" Stone's smile faded. His eyes grew cold. "Right now, while your armada sits here staring at 40 ships, human strike teams are hitting targets across your dominion. Shipyards, fuel refineries, communication relays, training academies." He paused. "We are not fighting to defeat you, Admiral. We are fighting to dismantle your ability to wage war. And while you have been traveling here for 2 weeks, we have been very busy." Is turned to her communication officer. "Get me a status report, all sectors, now." The officer's face went pale as the reports came in. Prime shipyards, destroyed. The Amber Nebula fuel refineries, destroyed. The communication relay at Dominion Center, destroyed. The military academy at Ore, destroyed. 47 targets, all destroyed in the past 2 weeks. While the Grand Armada was traveling to the agricultural sector, human strike teams had been hitting targets across the Dominion. Targets that were not military installations. Targets that were not defended. Targets that were essential to the Dominion's ability to wage war. "How is this possible?" Is demanded. "How do you have so many ships? Our intelligence said your fleet was small." "It was," Stone admitted, 3 months ago, but we have been building, Admiral. Every factory on Earth, Mars, and Luna has been producing warships, not battleships like yours. Small, fast ships designed to slip through your defenses and hit targets you never thought to protect." He shrugged. "You destroyed Europa to teach us fear. Instead, you taught us focus. You showed us that you have no mercy, so we decided we could not afford to lose." Is stared at him. "You cannot win this war. Even if you destroy our shipyards, we still have the Grand Armada, 10,000 ships against your primitives." "True," Stone said. "But think about what I just told you. 47 targets destroyed in 2 weeks. Shipyards, fuel refineries, communication relays. How long can your Grand Armada fight without fuel? How long can you coordinate your forces without communication? How long can you replace your losses without shipyards?" Is said nothing. She was beginning to understand. "You have the greatest military force in the galaxy," Stone continued. "But a military force needs support, supply lines, fuel depots, repair facilities, training programs. These are the things that allow an army to fight. These are the things we are destroying." He leaned forward. "Your Grand Armada is powerful, but power without support is just a collection of machines waiting to break down." "You are insane," Is said. "Even if you destroy our support infrastructure, we will rebuild it. We have rebuilt before." "With what?" Stone asked. "Your shipyards are gone, your factories are next, your fuel refineries are burning as we speak. You can rebuild, Admiral, but it will take years, decades, and during that time we will keep fighting, we will keep destroying, we will not stop until the Dominion no longer has the ability to threaten us." "We will destroy you first," Is snarled. "We will burn Earth to ash. We will hunt down every human in the galaxy and exterminate them." Stone nodded slowly. "You could try, but while your armada is hunting us, who will protect who will guard your remaining infrastructure? Who will stop our strike teams from destroying everything you need to survive?" He smiled again, but there was no warmth in it. "You see, Admiral, that is the difference between us. You fight to win. We fight to end wars. You want to defeat us. We want to make sure you can never threaten anyone again." "That is not how war works," Is said. "It is now." The communication ended. Is stood on her bridge, surrounded by the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, and realized that she had no idea what to do. The humans were not following the rules. They were not fighting for territory or resources or tribute. They were fighting to destroy the Dominion's ability to wage war, and they were succeeding. She turned to her tactical officer. "Plot a course back to Dominion space. We need to protect our remaining infrastructure." "What about the farming worlds, Admiral?" Is hesitated. If she left, the humans would control the agricultural sector. The Dominion would face famine. But if she stayed, human strike teams would continue to destroy everything that kept the Dominion functioning. It was an impossible choice, and that, she realized, was exactly what the humans had intended. "We return to Dominion space," she said finally. "The farming worlds will have to wait. We cannot fight a war without ships, without fuel, without communication." The Grand Armada turned and began its journey back to Dominion space. Behind them, the 40 human ships remained in position, still blocking the farming worlds. They had not fired a single shot. They had not lost a single ship, and they had forced the greatest military force in galactic history to retreat. On Earth, Director received the news with grim satisfaction. The first phase of the plan had worked. The Dominion was confused, disorganized, and reacting to events instead of controlling them. But she knew this was just the beginning. They were not defeated. They were not even weakened. They still had their Grand Armada, their trillion citizens, their 10,000 years of experience. All humanity had was a plan, a principle, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for their children's future. She looked at the star map on her wall. Red dots marked destroyed targets across the Dominion. Blue dots marked human fleet positions. Green dots marked the next wave of targets. There were so many green dots. General Stone entered her office. His face was tired but determined. "The Armada is retreating. They are heading back to protect their core systems." As expected, said, "What are our losses?" 12 ships, 300 crew members. Stone paused. They knew the risks. They volunteered. Nodded slowly. Every death was a weight on her soul. 300 more names to add to the list that had begun with Europa. 200,000 dead on that frozen moon. 300 more dead in the strike teams. How many more would die before this war was over? "The next phase begins in 48 hours, she said. "Are our forces ready?" "They are," Stone hesitated. "But I need to ask you something, Director, something that has been bothering me." "Ask." "What happens if we win?" He looked at her with tired eyes. "The Dominion has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, a trillion citizens, thousands of species. If we break them, if we destroy their ability to wage war, what happens to all those people? Do we let them starve? Do we watch their civilization collapse?" Was silent for a long moment. She had asked herself the same question many times. The answer she had found was not easy, but it was the only answer she could live with. "We are not fighting to destroy she said finally. "We are fighting to destroy their ability to threaten us. When the war is over, we will help them rebuild. We will share our technology, our knowledge, our food. We will show them that there is another way to live, a way that does not require conquest and tribute. They may not accept our help. They may hate us forever. Perhaps," looked out the window at the night sky, "but our children will be free, and maybe in 100 years their children and our children will look at each other as partners instead of enemies." She turned back to Stone. "That is what we are fighting for, General. Not revenge, not conquest, not power. We are fighting for a future where no child has to fear the stars." Stone nodded slowly. He did not look convinced, but he did not argue. There would be time for those debates later. For now, they had a war to fight. And unlike any war the galaxy had ever seen, this war would not end in treaty or tribute. It would end only when one side could no longer fight. They believed they knew what that meant. They believed it meant death and destruction. They believed the humans would eventually tire, eventually weaken, eventually break. They did not understand yet. The humans would not stop. They would not negotiate. They would not accept partial victory or temporary peace. They would keep fighting until the Dominion was no longer a threat to anyone. Not because they hated because they loved their children more. In the darkness between stars, human ships moved silently toward their next targets. They carried weapons and soldiers and the weight of humanity's hopes. They carried the memory of Europa and the promise of a future free from fear. They carried the message that they had not yet understood but would soon learn. Humans do not fight to win. They fight to end wars. And this war was only beginning. The Grand Armada returned to Dominion space after 3 weeks of travel. Admiral is expected to find her empire intact, waiting to be defended. Instead, she found ruins. The shipyards at Prime had been reduced to floating debris. The fuel refineries in the Amber Nebula were still burning, their fires visible from 1,000 kilometers away. The communication relay at Dominion Center was simply gone, erased from existence as if it had never been built. But the worst news came from the home sector. While the Armada had been chasing human decoys, strike teams had hit the training academies. 5,000 years of military knowledge, stored in ancient databases and taught by master warriors, had been destroyed in a single night. Is stood on her bridge and read the damage reports. She had been a soldier for 200 years. She had seen battles and destruction and death, but she had never seen anything like this. The humans were not trying to defeat the military. They were trying to erase it. Every target they hit was something essential to the Dominion's ability to wage war. Shipyards to build new ships, fuel refineries to power existing ships, communication relays to coordinate fleets, training academies to create new soldiers. It was as if they had studied the Dominion's entire infrastructure and identified every point of weakness, every system that kept the war machine running, every link in the chain that connected the Armada to its support network. And then they had begun to cut those links, one by one. Admiral, her communication officer's voice was shaking. We have received a message from the human commander. Play it. General Stone's face appeared on he looked tired but determined. Behind him could see the bridge of a human warship. It was small and cramped compared to her flagship, but it was filled with activity. Officers moved with purpose. Screens displayed tactical information. Everything seemed focused and efficient. Admiral, Stone said, by now you have seen what we have done. Your shipyards are gone. Your fuel refineries are destroyed. Your communication network is crippled. Your training academies are ash. He paused. This is not a threat. This is a fact. We have spent the past 2 months dismantling your infrastructure while you chased shadows. Is said nothing. She wanted to rage at him, to threaten him with destruction, to promise revenge. But she knew that words meant nothing now. Only actions mattered. We are sending you a list of coordinates, Stone continued. These are the locations of your remaining strategic assets, fuel depots, repair stations, manufacturing plants. We know where all of them are. We have ships positioned to destroy each one. He leaned forward. You have a choice, Admiral. Surrender now unconditionally and we will stop. We will not destroy your remaining infrastructure. We will not hunt down your scattered fleets. We will not burn your worlds. And if we refuse, is asked, then we will continue. We will destroy every target on that list. We will dismantle your Dominion piece by piece until there is nothing left. Not your fleets, not your factories, not your ability to ever threaten anyone again. Stone's eyes were hard. We do not want this, Admiral. We take no pleasure in destruction, but we will not stop until our children are safe. And our children will never be safe as long as the Dominion can wage war. The communication ended. Is stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Admiral, her first officer, stepped forward. What are your orders? Contact the High Council, is said. Tell them we need to discuss terms. But High Counselor refused to discuss terms. He refused to even consider surrender. The Dominion had never surrendered in 10,000 years. They would not surrender now, not to primitive creatures who had barely left there. We will destroy them, declared to the Council. We will take the Grand Armada to there and burn it to ash. Without their planet, the humans will scatter and die. This war will end with their extinction. Ambassador or spoke up. With respect, High Counselor, that strategy has already failed. We sent the Armada to destroy them once before. They used our absence to destroy our infrastructure. If we leave again, they will destroy whatever remains. Then what do you suggest? Demanded. Negotiation, or said. The humans have made their demands clear. They want us to stop threatening them. They want their children to be free from the Dominion. If we agree to their terms, they will stop their attacks. The Dominion does not negotiate with lesser species, said. We dictate, we demand, we take. That is how we have survived for 10,000 years. And if that strategy no longer works, or asked quietly. The council chamber fell silent. No one had ever questioned the Dominion's methods so directly. It was unthinkable. It was almost treasonous. But Or was right, and everyone knew it. The humans had changed the rules of war. They had refused to fight for territory or resources or tribute. They had refused to surrender when outmatched. They had refused to negotiate partial terms or temporary peace. Instead, they had studied the Dominion and identified its weaknesses. They had built a military designed to exploit those weaknesses, and they had attacked with a single goal, to destroy the Dominion's ability to wage war. It was brilliant, it was terrifying, and they had no idea how to respond. We attack Earth, said finally. We end this at its source. Without there, the humans will have nothing to fight for. Admiral is stepped forward. High Counselor, I must advise against this. Our fuel reserves are critically low. The humans have destroyed most of our refineries. If we send the Armada to Earth, we may not have enough fuel to return. Then we will refuel at Earth after we destroy it. The humans will anticipate this, is said. They have anticipated everything else. If we send the Armada to Earth, they will hit our remaining infrastructure. They will destroy our last fuel depots, our last shipyards, our last manufacturing plants. By the time we return, there will be nothing left. Then what do you suggest, Admiral? His voice was cold with anger. We protect what remains, is said. We pull back our forces and defend our core systems. We rebuild our infrastructure slowly and carefully. We wait for the humans to overextend themselves, and then we strike. That could take years, decades. Yes, but it is the only strategy that has a chance of success. The humans are not trying to defeat us in battle. They are trying to exhaust us. They are trying to destroy our ability to fight. If we play their game, if we chase them across the galaxy while they destroy our support systems, we will lose. Was silent for a long moment. He was old enough to remember when the Dominion had faced serious challenges. There had been species that fought hard, that refused to surrender easily, that made the Dominion pay for every victory. But none of them had ever done what the humans were doing. None of them had ever attacked the infrastructure instead of the military. None of them had ever fought to end the war instead of to win it. Very well, he said finally. We will adopt your strategy, Admiral. We will pull back and defend. But I want the humans punished for this. I want them to suffer. They already are, is said quietly. They are dying by the thousands in their attacks. They are sacrificing their lives to protect their children. They are suffering more than we can imagine. She paused. That is what makes them so dangerous. They are not fighting for glory or power or revenge. They are fighting for love, and love makes people willing to do terrible things. The Grand Armada pulled back to the Dominion's core systems. They established defensive perimeters around the remaining infrastructure. They waited for the humans to attack. But the humans did not attack the way they expected. Instead of massing their forces for a direct assault, the humans continued their strategy of pinpoint strikes. They hit targets at the edges of the defensive perimeter. They destroyed isolated fuel depots and communication relays. They picked off patrol ships that strayed too far from the main fleet. It was like being bitten by 1,000 insects. Each bite was small, almost insignificant, but together they were bleeding the Dominion dry. General Stone watched the battle from his command ship, the Spirit of Europa. It was named for the colony that had destroyed. 200,000 dead, families erased, children murdered. The ship carried that memory like a sacred duty. "Status report," Stone said. His tactical officer, a young woman named Lieutenant, no relation to the director, pulled up the latest data. "We have destroyed 47 targets in the past 3 weeks. The defensive perimeter is holding, but they are burning through their fuel reserves faster than expected. At current rates, they will reach critical levels within 6 months. Casualties: 2,347 confirmed dead, 8 ships lost." Lieutenant's voice was steady, but Stone could see the pain in her eyes. Every death was personal to her. She had lost her brother on Europa. "Too many," Stone said quietly, "but not in vain." He looked at the tactical display. They had the strongest military in the galaxy, 10,000 warships, 1,000,000 soldiers, centuries of experience. But they were designed for conquest, not defense. They were built to attack weak targets and extract tribute. They had never faced an enemy that refused to play by their rules. And now they were trapped. If they stayed in their defensive positions, the humans would continue to bleed them. If they sent forces to hunt the human strike teams, they would leave their infrastructure vulnerable. If they attacked Earth, they would run out of fuel before they could return. Every option led to defeat. The only question was how long it would take. Stone's communication officer spoke up. "General, we have an incoming message from the flagship. Admiral wants to speak with you." "Put her through." His face appeared on the screen. She looked different from the last time they had spoken. Older, somehow, tired. Her scales had lost some of their luster. "General Stone," she said, "I have been authorized by the High Council to open negotiations." Stone felt a flicker of hope, but he kept his face neutral. "What kind of negotiations?" "We are prepared to offer a ceasefire. We will withdraw from human space and recognize your territory. In exchange, you will stop your attacks on our infrastructure." Stone shook his head slowly. "That is not acceptable, Admiral." Looked surprised. "You are winning. Why would you refuse a ceasefire?" "Because a ceasefire is not an end to the war. It is a pause." Stone leaned forward. "You will use the time to rebuild your infrastructure. You will train new soldiers, build new ships, repair your refineries. And in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years, you will attack again. You will burn more colonies. You will murder more children. The cycle will continue." "That is how war works," said. "Not anymore." Stone's voice was hard. "We are not fighting to win, Admiral. We are fighting to end this war forever. A ceasefire does not achieve that goal. Only unconditional surrender does." "Unconditional surrender is impossible. The High Council will never agree." "Then the war continues," Stone shrugged. "We have enough ships to sustain our attacks for another 5 years. By that time, your infrastructure will be completely destroyed. Your fleet will be stranded without fuel. Your factories will be silent. Your people will be starving." He paused. "We do not want this, Admiral. We take no pleasure in your suffering, but we will not stop until our children are safe." "You are asking us to give up everything we have built for 10,000 years, said. "No, we are asking you to give up the ability to threaten us. Your civilization can survive. Your people can thrive. But you will no longer have the power to conquer and enslave other species. That is our condition. The only condition." Was silent for a long moment. "And if we accept, what happens to our people?" Stone's expression softened slightly. We help you rebuild. We share our technology and our resources. We work together to create a galaxy where no species has to fear conquest. He paused. We are not monsters, Admiral. We do not want to destroy you. We only want to protect our children. I do not have the authority to accept your terms, is said. Then find someone who does. And hurry. Our strike teams are preparing their next wave of attacks. Every day you delay, more of your infrastructure disappears. The communication ended. Stone leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He was so tired. The war had been going on for 8 months now. 8 months of planning, fighting, dying. 8 months of watching good people sacrifice themselves for a cause they might not live to see completed. But they were winning. Slowly, painfully, at terrible cost, they were winning. The Dominion was crumbling. Their infrastructure was in ruins. Their fleet was stranded. Their confidence was shattered. And for the first time in 10,000 years, they were afraid. On Earth, Director received the report of Stone's conversation with Admiral Is. She read it carefully, nodding every word. They are considering surrender, her aide said. This is a good sign. It is a sign that they are desperate, corrected. Desperate people are dangerous. They may lash out, try something unexpected. She looked at the tactical display. Tell General Stone to maintain pressure, but tell him to be careful. A wounded animal is most dangerous when cornered. Yes, Director. Walked to the window of her office and looked out at the city below. New York had been rebuilt since the last Great War, 2 centuries ago. The buildings were tall and clean, the streets filled with people living their lives. Children played in parks, families shared meals, lovers walked hand in hand. This was what they were fighting for, not territory or resources or power. Life. Simple, precious, ordinary life. They had threatened to take that away. They had promised to turn humanity into slaves, to make their children serve the Dominion forever. They had murdered 200,000 people on Europa to demonstrate their power. Now they were learning the truth about humanity. They were learning that humans did not fight to win. They fought to end wars. They fought to protect what they loved, and they would never, ever stop. Not until their children were safe. Not until the war was truly over. Turned back to her desk and began reviewing the next phase of operations. There was still so much work to do, so many targets to destroy, so many lives to spend. But the end was in sight. The Dominion was breaking, and when it finally fell, humanity would be free. Forever. That was worth any price, any sacrifice, any amount of blood and tears and death. For their children. For the future. For the end of war. The surrender came on the 427th day of the war. Admiral Is transmitted the message personally. Her face was gaunt, her scales dull and cracked. Behind her, the bridge of her flagship was nearly empty. Most of her crew had been transferred to other ships to conserve fuel. The Eternal Dominion, once the pride of the fleet, was now little more than a floating tomb. General Stone, she said, I am authorized to offer the unconditional surrender of the Grand Armada. All military vessels will power down their weapons and await your instructions. Stone received the message on the spirit of Europa. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the moment. 427 days, 14 months of war, thousands of human lives lost, millions of lives disrupted. And now it was over. Admiral, he replied, on behalf of the Terran Defense Command, I accept your surrender. Your ships will be boarded and inspected. Your crews will be treated with dignity and respect. No harm will come to those who cooperate. Understood. Is paused. General, may I ask you something? Ask. Why? Her voice was tired, almost broken. Why did you keep fighting? We had the strongest military in the galaxy. We had 10,000 ships and 1 million soldiers. You had nothing but a few hundred vessels and the stubbornness to die for your cause. Why did you not accept our terms when we first offered them? Why did you sacrifice so many of your people? Stone was silent for a long moment. He thought about Europa, 200,000 dead. He thought about the soldiers who had died in the strike teams, the pilots who had flown into impossible odds, the engineers who had worked themselves to death building ships and weapons. Because surrender was not an option, he said finally. Your terms would have made our children slaves. They would have grown up serving the Dominion, working in your mines and factories, living their entire lives in bondage. We could not accept that. We would rather die free than live as servants. But so many died, is said. So many on both sides, was it worth it? Ask me again in 50 years, Stone said. Ask theirs. If they grow up free, if they never have to fear the Dominion, if they can look at the stars without terror, then yes, it was worth it. The surrender of the Grand Armada was just the beginning. For the next 3 months, human forces continued their operations across space, but they were no longer attacking, they were dismantling. General Stone had given clear orders: destroy anything that could be used to wage war: shipyards, weapons factories, military academies, ammunition depots, training facilities, research stations developing new weapons, everything that allowed the Dominion to build and maintain a military force. But also, do no harm to civilians. Do not destroy cities or homes or farms. Do not kill those who do not resist. The goal was not genocide, it was disarmament. Total, complete, permanent disarmament. They watched in confused horror as their empire was taken apart. Human engineers moved through their shipyards with cutting tools and explosives, reducing centuries of work to scrap metal. Human soldiers seized their weapons caches and destroyed them in controlled detonations. Human technicians erased the databases containing military knowledge and tactics. It was not conquest. The humans were not taking territory or demanding tribute. They were simply removing this ability to threaten anyone ever again. High Counselor demanded a meeting with Director. He was brought to Earth aboard a human transport ship, stripped of his guards and his weapons and his dignity. When he finally stood before the Director, he was just an old alien in plain clothes, defeated and confused. "What do you want?" he demanded. "Name your tribute, name your territory. What must we give to end this?" Looked at him with tired eyes. She had not slept properly in months. The war had aged her 10 years. Her hair was fully white now, her face lined with exhaustion and worry. "You do not understand," she said quietly. "We are not fighting to take something from you. We never were." "Then why destroy everything we built? Why dismantle our shipyards and erase our knowledge? Why leave us defenseless?" "Because we are fighting to end the war," said. "Not this war. All wars. Every war that could ever be fought between our species. We are fighting so that 50 years from now, when our children are grown, they will not have to fight this war again. We are fighting so that you will not have the ability to threaten ours." Stared at her. "That is impossible. War is part of life. War has existed since the beginning of the Dominion, since the beginning of all civilizations. You cannot end war." "We can end your ability to wage it," said. "We can destroy your weapons and your ships and your training academies. We can make sure that even if you wanted to attack us, you would not have the means to do so. We can give our children peace not through treaties or promises, but through simple incapacity." "You are making us helpless," said. "Without our military, other species will attack us. We will be conquered and enslaved, just as we conquered and enslaved others." "No," said, "that is not what will happen." She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the city. The sky was painted in shades of orange and gold, beautiful and peaceful. "When the dismantling is complete," she said, "we will help you rebuild. Not your military, your civilization. We will share our agricultural technology so you can feed your people. We will share our medical knowledge so you can heal your sick. We will share our engineering so you can build cities and infrastructure." "Why?" asked. "Why would you help us after everything we have done?" "Because we are not like you," turned to face him. "You see war as a cycle. Attack, conquer, extract tribute, repeat. You have done this for 10,000 years. You cannot imagine any other way of living. But we can. We dream of a galaxy where species work together instead of conquering each other, where children grow up without fear, where the stars represent opportunity instead of danger." "A fantasy," said. "The universe is cruel, the strong survive, the weak are destroyed." "Perhaps, or perhaps that is just the story you have told yourselves to justify your cruelty." Sat down again. "We are giving you a choice, High Counselor. You can cling to your old ways, you can hate us forever. You can dream of revenge that you will never have the power to achieve, or you can accept our help. You can build a new civilization. You can become something better than what you were." Was silent for a long time. He thought about his life, his empire, everything he had believed. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had been the masters of 1,000 species. They had believed themselves invincible. And now they were defeated, not by a stronger military or a more advanced technology, but by a species that refused to play by the rules, a species that fought not to win, but to end. "If we accept your help," he said finally, "what do you expect in return?" "Nothing," said. "We expect nothing, we ask nothing, we only offer." No one gives without expecting something in return. "We do," smiled slightly. "It is one of our strangest qualities. We call it hope. We hope that if we help you, you will become better. We hope that your children will not grow up hating us. We hope that someday, far in the future, humans and will stand together as partners. We hope for a better universe." She paused. "But even if those hopes are never realized, we will still help you, because it is the right thing to do." Did not understand. He could not understand. His entire life had been built on the principle that power was everything, that the strong took from the weak, that kindness was weakness. But he was too tired and too defeated to argue. "Very well," he said, "we accept your help." The reconstruction of space began 6 months after the surrender. Human ships arrived carrying not weapons but seeds. Agricultural experts who had never held a gun walked across worlds, teaching the former conquerors how to grow their own food. Engineers helped rebuild communication networks, this time designed for commerce and education instead of military coordination. Teachers established schools where children learned history, science, art, and philosophy. It was not easy. Many hated the humans. They remembered their fallen empire, their lost power, their humiliation. They whispered about revenge, about rebuilding their fleet in secret, about striking back when the humans least expected it. But the humans had been thorough. Every shipyard was destroyed. Every weapons factory was gone. Every database containing military knowledge was erased. Even if they wanted to rebuild their military, they would have to start from nothing. It would take decades, perhaps centuries. And during those decades, something strange began to happen. Children grew up without learning war. They learned farming instead, and building and creating. They played games that did not involve conquest. They dreamed dreams that did not involve domination. A generation was born that had never known the Dominion. They heard stories of the old empire, of the 10,000 years of conquest, of the species enslaved and destroyed. But to them, it was just history, ancient history, the actions of ancestors they had never met. They looked at the humans and saw not enemies but teachers, partners, friends. General Stone returned to Earth 2 years after the war ended. He was old now, his hair completely gray, his body worn from years of fighting. He had given everything to the war, his youth, his health, his peace of mind. But when he looked at the children playing in the streets, when he saw families living without fear, when he watched the sun set over a world that was finally safe, he knew it had been worth it. Director met him at the spaceport. She was using a cane now, her body weakened by the stress of the war years, but her eyes were still sharp, still determined. "It is done," she said. "Is it?" Stone asked. "The still exist. Their culture still remembers conquest. How do we know they will not rebuild their military in secret? How do we know they will not attack again in 100 years? We do not know, admitted. We can never know for certain, but we have done everything we could. We have destroyed their ability to wage war. We have helped them build a new society. We have given their children a chance to grow up without learning hatred. She smiled slightly. The rest is up to them. And if they choose revenge, then there will face our and our will be ready. Looked up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. But I do not think that will happen. I have met the young. They are different from their parents. They do not dream of conquest. They dream of the stars, of exploration, of discovery. They are curious and creative and kind. Monsters can be born from kind parents, Stone said. Yes, but so can heroes, so can peacemakers, so can friends. Put her hand on his arm. We have done what we could. We have fought our war. Now it is time to let the next generation fight theirs. And perhaps if we have done our work well, they will not have to fight at all. Stone nodded slowly. He was not convinced. He had seen too much death, too much cruelty, too much hatred. He could not believe that peace would last. But he could hope. That was the human way, after all, to hope for better things, to work toward a future that might never come, to fight for the children even when the odds seemed impossible. The war was over. The Dominion was broken. Humanity was free. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the next generation was growing up. Human children and children, born into a universe shaped by the sacrifices of their parents. What they would do with that universe remained to be seen. But for now, for this moment, there was peace, true peace, not a pause between wars, but a genuine end to hostility. Director gave a speech on the second anniversary of the surrender. She stood before a crowd of millions, both human and broadcast across 100 worlds. We did not fight to conquer you, she said, her voice carried across light years. We did not fight to rule you. We did not fight for revenge or territory or power. We fought to break the cycle, to end the eternal war that your ancestors built and maintained for 10,000 years. She paused, looking out at the mixed crowd, human faces and scales, former enemies standing side by side. You called us primitive because we had not yet mastered the stars, but we had mastered something you never learned, how to stop fighting. A war you intend to fight again is not a war. It is a harvest. It is farming conflict for profit and power, and we refuse to be your harvest. The crowd was silent, thousands of beings holding their breath, waiting for her next words. Now the harvest is over, the cycle is broken. What comes next is up to all of us. We can hate each other forever. We can dream of revenge that will never come. We can teach our children to fear and despise each other. She shook her head. Or we can build something new, something better. A galaxy where children look at the stars and see wonder, not danger. A future where humans and work together, explore together, dream together. She raised her hand toward the sky. The choice is yours. The choice is ours. And I believe with all my heart that we will choose well. The crowd erupted in cheers. Human voices and voices mingled together, rising toward the stars. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There would be challenges and setbacks and moments of doubt. There would be those who clung to hatred and those who could not forgive. But for the first time in 10,000 years, there was hope. Real hope. And that was enough. 50 years had passed since the end of the war. I walked through the halls of the Grand Archive, her scales shimmering in the soft light. She was young by standards, barely 60 years old. Her grandmother had been born during the final days of the Dominion. Her mother had grown up in the years of Reconstruction. She herself had never known anything but peace. The archive was one of the few buildings that had survived the war. It held the history of the people, stretching back 10,000 years. But the sections about the war and its aftermath had been added later, carefully compiled from records and testimonies and memories. This was where II had come to complete her research. She was a historian at the University of New Dawn, the first institution of higher learning built after the war. Her thesis was ambitious: to understand why the humans had stopped. They had possessed the power to destroy the completely. They had the ships, the weapons, the will. They could have wiped out an entire species in revenge for Europa. But they did not. Instead, they had helped rebuild. They had shared technology and knowledge. They had taught the how to farm, how to create, how to live without conquest. Why? That question had haunted II since childhood. Her grandmother had spoken of the war sometimes, late at night when sleep would not come. She had described the terror of those days, the confusion of defeat, the strange mercy that followed. "They should have killed us," grandmother had whispered. "By all the rules we knew they should have killed us, but they did not, and I still do not understand why." Neither did II, but she was determined to find out. The archive contained thousands of documents from the war period, reports from military commanders, diplomatic correspondence, personal diaries and letters. II had spent 3 years reading through them, piecing together the story of those terrible months. But the document that mattered most was not from the. It was a speech given by director at the war's end. A copy had been preserved in the archive, along with a translation into the language. II had read it dozens of times, searching for meaning in every word. She pulled it up on her screen now, reading it one more time. "We did not come to conquer you. We did not come to rule you. We came to break the machine that made you believe war was eternal. You called us primitive because we had not yet mastered the stars. But we had mastered something you never learned: how to stop fighting." II paused at those words. How to stop fighting. Such a simple idea, and yet so foreign to everything her ancestors had believed. They had been warriors for 10,000 years. War was not just something they did. It was who they were. Their culture, their religion, their very identity was built around conquest and domination. They had believed that peace was impossible, that the universe was an endless struggle for survival, that only the strong deserved to exist. The humans had proven them wrong. Not by being stronger, not by being more advanced, but by being different, by refusing to accept the rules that had governed galactic civilization by fighting not to win but to end. II continued reading. "A war you intend to fight again is not a war. It is a harvest, and we refuse to be harvested." A harvest. That was exactly what the Dominion had been doing. For 10,000 years they had harvested species after species. Attack, conquer, extract tribute, wait, repeat. It was farming on a galactic scale, and they had never seen anything wrong with it. Until the humans came. The humans had looked at the cycle and said no, not just to their own subjugation, but to the cycle itself. They had fought to break it permanently, to make sure that no species would ever be harvested again. It was revolutionary. It was almost incomprehensible. And yet, looking back, it seemed obvious. Of course there was a better way. Of course endless war was not the only option. Of course cooperation was better than conquest. But no one had ever proven it before. No one had ever been willing to pay the price. The humans had paid. Thousands of them had died in the war. Millions more had sacrificed years of their lives to the effort. They had given everything to break the cycle. And then they had helped their former enemies rebuild. II closed the document and leaned back in her chair. She thought about her life, her world, her generation. They were different from their grandparents in ways that were almost impossible to describe. They did not dream of conquest. They did not believe that war was inevitable. They did not see other species as enemies to be defeated or resources to be exploited. They were farmers and builders and teachers, artists and scientists and dreamers. They looked at the stars and saw possibility, not threat. Was this what the humans had fought for? This generation, these children who had never known war. She thought of her mother, a botanist who spent her days developing new crops for worlds. She thought of her father, an architect who designed buildings that blended in human styles. She thought of her friends, her classmates, her colleagues. None of them were warriors. None of them wanted to be. The old ways were dying. The warrior caste that had dominated society had faded into irrelevance. There was no fleet for them to command, no enemy for them to fight. The last of them spent their days in museums and archives, relics of a past that grew more distant every year. And in their place, a new had emerged, a that created instead of destroyed, that built instead of conquered, that looked at the humans not as enemies to be feared, but as partners to be respected. Or I smiled slightly. Her grandmother would not have recognized this world. Her grandmother had grown up believing that war was eternal, that peace was impossible, that the strong must always dominate the weak. Her grandmother had been wrong. She began to write the conclusion of her thesis. The humans taught us the truth that our ancestors never understood. They did not fight to win. They fought to make sure no one ever had to fight again. For 10,000 years, the Dominion had believed that war was the natural state of the universe. We had built our entire civilization around this belief. We had conquered and enslaved and destroyed, always assuming that this was the only way to survive. The humans showed us another way. They proved that it was possible to end the cycle, not through superior force but through superior will. They were willing to sacrifice everything, their lives, their resources, their very existence, for a future they might never see. They fought for their children and all the generations that would come after. And in doing so, they saved us, not from destruction, not from conquest, but from ourselves. They broke the machine that had enslaved us to eternal war. They gave us the chance to become something better. Many of my people still do not understand this. Many still hate the humans for what they did. Many still dream of revenge that will never come. But I believe that with each generation, we grow closer to the truth. We learn to create instead of destroy. We learn to cooperate instead of conquer. We learn to see other species as partners instead of prey. The war is over. It has been over for 50 years, but its lessons will echo through history forever. The humans did not just defeat the Dominion. They changed the very nature of conflict in our galaxy. They proved that war does not have to be eternal, that peace is possible, that love is stronger than hate. They taught us the truth, and for that we owe them everything. Or I saved her work and stepped away from her desk. Through the window, she could see the memorial garden that surrounded the archive. Trees from a dozen worlds grew there, planted by veterans of the war and their descendants. It was a place of peace and reflection, where beings of all species could sit and remember. She walked out into the garden, feeling the warm sun on her scales. In the center of the garden stood a monument, a human oak tree growing beside a crystal spire. They had been planted by Director and High Counselor 2 years after the war ended, as a symbol of the new relationship between their peoples. Had died 20 years ago peacefully in her sleep, had followed her a decade later. The other leaders of the war were mostly gone now, their work completed, their sacrifices remembered. But their legacy lived on, in the garden that surrounded the archive, in the cities that had risen from the ruins, in the children who played without fear, in the generations that would never know war. Or I walked to the monument and read the plaque at its base. It was written in both languages, human and never again. 2 words, simple and profound, the promise that both species had made to each other and to themselves. Never again would they conquer and enslave. Never again would they destroy worlds and harvest species. Never again would they see war as the natural order of things. And never again would humanity have to fight the way they had fought. Never again would they have to sacrifice their children for the freedom of their. Never again would they have to watch their colonies burn. The cycle was broken, the harvest was ended, The war was over. A young human student approached the monument, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. She was perhaps 20 years old, born long after the war ended. Her ancestors had fought and died in the strike teams. Her grandmother had lost 2 brothers at the Battle of Saul. But she looked at HFY without fear or hatred. She smiled and nodded politely, a greeting between strangers who shared a world. "Are you here for the ceremony?" the human asked. HFY blinked in surprise. "What ceremony?" "The anniversary," the human said. 50 years since the end of the war. They are having a celebration in the city tonight. Representatives from both species will speak. There will be music and food and fireworks." She smiled again. "You should come. It is supposed to be beautiful." HFY looked at the young human. 50 years ago, her great-grandmother would have seen this girl as a slave to be harvested. 50 years ago, this girl's great-grandmother would have seen HFY as an enemy to be destroyed. Now they stood together in a garden, talking about ceremonies and celebrations. 2 strangers from different species, sharing a world, sharing a future. This was what the humans had fought for, this moment, this possibility, this chance for peace. "I would like that," HFY said. "I would like that very much." They walked together toward the city, 2 young women from species that had once been enemies. Above them, the stars glittered like promises. Ahead of them, the lights of the city blazed with celebration. The war was 50 years gone, but its truth remained. Humans do not fight to win, they fight to end wars. And because of that truth, because of their sacrifice, because of their strange and wonderful refusal to accept the rules, the galaxy had changed. The cycle was broken. The harvest was ended. A new age had begun. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There were still conflicts and disagreements and moments of tension. There were still those who clung to hatred and those who dreamed of revenge. But there was also hope, real hope, the kind of hope that builds cities and plants gardens and watches the sunset without fear. The kind of hope that says, "Never again," and means it. In the city, the celebration was beginning. Music filled the streets, a blend of human melodies and harmonies. Children ran through the crowds, laughing and playing, unaware of the history that had brought them to this moment. HFY watched them with tears in her eyes. These children would never know war. They would never know fear. They would grow up in a universe of possibility and wonder, where the stars represented exploration instead of conquest. This was the gift the humans had given, not just to them but to all species, the gift of peace, the gift of hope, the gift of a future worth living, the gift of ending, not winning. As the fireworks began to light up the sky, HFY made a silent promise to herself and to the universe. She would spend her life teaching the truth. She would make sure that no one ever forgot what the humans had done and why they had done it. She would make sure that "never again" remained not just a promise but a reality. For the children, for the future, for the truth that had saved them all. The truth that humans do not fight to win. They fight to end wars. Forever.